It was Christmas Eve, and I was standing outside the house I grew up in, holding a pecan pie that took me 5 hours to make. My breath fogged in the frozen air. The cold bit through my gloves, stinging my fingertips. Behind the frosted window, I could see soft golden lights twinkling, shadows moving across the living room I used to decorate every single year. I heard the faint clink of wine glasses. Laughter. Something warm. Something alive. I rang the doorbell and waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then the door opened, and there she stood, my mother, wearing a sweater with sequined reindeer antlers. Her eyes met mine and stayed completely flat. She smiled politely like I was a stranger selling something. "Sorry," she said slowly, her hand still gripping the doorknob. "I think you have the wrong house." I blinked. "Mom, it's me." Her smile didn't falter. "I don't recognize you." And then, gently, she closed the door. I wasn't always the stranger at the door. There was a time when my name was on every grocery list, every utility bill, every whispered thank you that came too quietly and too late. When Dad had his stroke 3 years ago, I was the one who took unpaid leave from my job in Portland to manage his medical appointments. I organized his prescriptions, filled out the endless disability paperwork for Social Security and Medicare, and sat in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mom couldn't handle it alone. She'd call me at 2 in the morning, sobbing, asking me what to do. Ryan, my older brother, said he was too overwhelmed, so I handled it, all of it. When the mortgage nearly slipped into foreclosure 2 winters ago, I wired $4,800 in one night. 3 months of payments. No one asked me to do it. They just assumed I would. And I did because that's what the capable daughter does, right? No fuss. No need to be told she's needed. She just appears, fixes everything, and disappears again until the next crisis. I bought the Christmas tree the year Dad got laid off. I wrapped gifts and labeled them "From Mom and Dad," even though I'd paid for every single one. I covered Ryan's rent for 7 consecutive months when he decided to take time off work to find himself. I didn't flinch when Mom texted me, "Sweetheart, can you help Ryan again? You know how hard it's been for him." No, "How are you?" No, "Do you have enough?" Just, "Can you?" And I always did. Last Thanksgiving, I roasted the 20-pound turkey. I brought the wine, the mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole, the cranberry tart that took me half a day to perfect. I arrived early, set the table with the good china, lit the candles, and made sure everything looked like a magazine spread. And when it was time for the family photo, everyone gathered in front of the stone fireplace. Mom handed me her phone and said, "Can you take it, Emily? We just want the family in this one." I laughed it off, shrugged, but my hands shook when I held that phone. Later, when I asked her about it, she said, "You're just so independent, honey. You never really needed us." Independent. That was the polite word for invisible, the word they used when they didn't want to admit I'd been erased. I carried them financially. I carried them emotionally. And somehow, I became the only person they couldn't see, unless something was falling apart. Ryan, the same brother I'd fed and funded, left me a voicemail last year saying, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Em." And that Christmas Eve, I found out exactly what he'd do. He'd tell me not to make a scene while they shut the door in my face. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't really slept, just stared at the ceiling of my tiny studio apartment in Southeast Portland, replaying the moment over and over. My phone screen still glowed with Ryan's last message. "Let it go, Em. You're making this bigger than it is." I opened the family group chat we used for coordinating holidays. It didn't exist anymore, at least not for me. I'd been removed. I scrolled through my photos and found one Mom had posted last Christmas. The living room glowing with light. Dad holding a gift box. Ryan with his arm around his new girlfriend, Jenna. Everyone smiling, everyone except me, because I wasn't in the photo, not behind the camera, not in the frame, not even tagged in the comments. It was as if I hadn't been there at all. That's when I checked my mail. There was a letter from a law office downtown. Anderson and Bryce, attorneys at law. At first, I panicked. I thought it was about Dad's health or another mortgage issue, but no. It was a notice. Mom had updated her will, I read it once, then twice. My hands went numb. I had helped Mom draft that very document 2 years earlier. I'd paid for the consultation with the estate planning attorney. I'd typed up the healthcare directive, made sure the beneficiaries were clear, even ensured that Ryan was included despite contributing absolutely nothing to the household. Now she'd rewritten it. The house would go to Dad for as long as he lived, then to Ryan. Her jewelry, the pieces I used to try on as a little girl, would go to Jenna, Ryan's girlfriend of 11 months. Nothing for me, not even a mention. At the bottom of the letter, there was a handwritten note from the attorney summarizing the meeting. Client states that Emily is doing fine on her own, doesn't need anything. That's how she explained it. Not with anger, not with malice. Just cold, clean practicality. I wasn't part of the future because I didn't need to be. I sat there in my kitchen, the letter on the table, my coffee going cold, and I realized something. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource, a safety net they could pull when things got hard and fold back up when the crisis passed. I had been useful, and now I wasn't. So they erased me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Like crossing a name off a list. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there and let the silence settle around me like snow. I didn't argue. I didn't write a long text message demanding answers or apologies. I didn't call Mom and scream into the phone about betrayal and years of sacrifice. I just opened my banking app. First, I canceled the automatic rent transfer that had been going to my parents' account every month for the last 2 years. $600 a month. $14,400 total. Gone. Second, I removed my name from the shared savings account I'd set up for family emergencies after Dad's stroke. The one I'd been the only person contributing to. Third, I blocked the emergency credit card I'd given Ryan, the one he promised he'd only use for gas or groceries or genuine crises. Each action felt like closing a door, not slamming it, not locking it with anger, just clicking it shut, calmly, deliberately. There was no rush of fury, no flood of tears, just a strange, clean stillness, like the quiet that settles after a snowstorm when the whole world goes muffled in white. I walked to the kitchen and looked at the pecan pie sitting on my counter. It was still perfect. Golden crust, lattice top, the smell of brown sugar and butter still faint in the air. I'd made it with my grandmother's recipe, the one she taught me when I was 12. 5 hours of work, rolling dough, toasting pecans, mixing the filling by hand because that's how she said it should be done. I wrapped it carefully in aluminum foil, carried it down to my car, and drove back to their house. It was early. The street was silent. No one was awake yet. I walked up the driveway, the same one I used to shovel every winter, and set the pie gently on the porch. No note, no explanation. Just the pie, sitting there in the cold. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away. As I pulled onto the main road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house was still dark, the lights from their Christmas tree barely visible through the frost on the windows, and I realized something. I'd spent years trying to be seen by people who found life easier when I wasn't in the picture, so I removed myself. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, just out of exhaustion. I was tired of being invisible until I was needed. Tired of being the foundation everyone built their lives on and then forgot was even there. The silence didn't last long. By the second day after Christmas, my voicemail was full. By the third, Mom was calling from her work line, the one I didn't have saved. By the fourth, Ryan's messages shifted in tone. First, defensive. I don't know what you're trying to prove. Then furious. You're really going to leave Mom like this? Then pleading. I get it, okay? You're mad, but this is too far. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I finally understood something. My presence had never been the point, only my function. I wasn't Emily, the daughter, the sister. I was Emily, the solution, the one who made problems go away. And when I stopped solving those problems, they didn't miss me. They missed what I did. Then the cracks began to show. A week after Christmas, I got a text from Mrs. Daly, the neighbor who'd lived next door to my parents for 30 years. She still baked her own sourdough bread, still watched everything from her kitchen window. Your mom's been crying outside. Saw her in the yard with your dad yesterday. They were arguing. Something about the mortgage. 2 days later, another message. Did you know Ryan's girlfriend left? Said he maxed out her credit card, moved out while he was at work. I didn't reply. I just sat on my couch, tea in hand, and let the information settle. Then came the photo. It popped up on Instagram in a thread I hadn't muted yet. Ryan grinning, holding a brand new PlayStation 5. The caption read, "Got lucky this new year," with a hashtag that said, "Treat yourself." I stared at it. The emergency card. The one I'd given him for gas, groceries, genuine emergencies. I'd blocked it 2 days after Christmas, but not before he'd used it. Not before he'd decided that a gaming console was an emergency. That night, Mom called. Her voice was sharp, brittle, worn thin. Your father is furious. The rent didn't get paid. Ryan's in serious trouble. I can't do this alone, Emily. I didn't answer. I just let the phone ring until it stopped, because it was never about them needing me. It was about what happened when I stopped being invisible. For years, they had built a narrative. Ryan was the dreamer, the one who just needed time and support. I was the rock, the provider, the stable one who didn't need anything from anyone. But what happens when the provider stops showing up? When the foundation pulls itself out from under the weight? Everything collapses. The structure they built on top of me, the one they never acknowledged, cracked and crumbled, and I didn't feel guilty. I didn't gloat. I didn't screenshot Ryan's post or forward it with a sarcastic comment. I just closed the app, set my phone down, and let it ring. Because for the first time in my entire adult life, their emergency wasn't mine to solve. I agreed to see them once, just once. No buildup, no long emails back and forth, just a text from Dad. We need to talk. Sunday afternoon, please. So I went. I drove back to the house on a gray Sunday in early January. The Christmas lights were still up, but half of them weren't working. The wreath on the door was crooked. I walked in without knocking. Mom had cleaned. The living room smelled like lemon polish. Dad sat in his recliner wearing the sweater I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. Ryan didn't look up from his phone until I sat down. No one said, "I'm sorry." Instead, Mom reached for my hand like nothing had happened. Her fingers were cold. "Emily," she said softly, her voice practiced, "this has gone too far. We're family." That word again. Family. I looked at her, then at Dad, then at Ryan, still staring at his phone. "You shut the door in my face," I said quietly. "You told me I didn't belong, and when the rent stopped getting paid, then you remembered my name." Dad sighed, long and heavy, like I was being unreasonable. "We were under stress, Emily. You took it the wrong way." I almost laughed. "Is there a right way to be erased?" Ryan finally looked up. He scoffed. "You think you're the victim here? You've always been cold, Em. Always made us feel like we owed you something." I blinked. My voice stayed calm. "You did owe me. I kept the lights on in this house. I paid for Christmas. I paid for your gas, your groceries, your rent, your second and third chances." No one argued, because they knew it was true. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but still, no apology came. "You've always been so independent, sweetheart. We just thought you didn't need us." I stood up. My coat was still on. "I didn't need help," I said. "I needed to be recognized. I needed to be seen." Silence. Then Dad muttered, almost under his breath, "You don't walk away from family." I looked him straight in the eyes. My voice didn't shake. "You already walked away from me, Dad. You just did it quieter." They all stared. Not angry, just stunned. Like they'd finally heard something they couldn't argue with, couldn't spin, couldn't rewrite. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back one more time. "I was there," I said. "You just found life easier when I wasn't." And I walked out. No slamming, no waiting for them to follow. Just done. The next morning, I woke up to nothing. No missed calls. No voicemails filled with guilt or rage. Just quiet. I stood by my window with coffee in hand, watching the snow drift through the air like dust falling from the sky. For the first time in years, I didn't have a plan to fix anything. No bills to pay for someone else, no groceries to deliver, no calls to return out of obligation. Only stillness. And it didn't scare me. I opened my hallway closet and pulled down an old cardboard box labeled Home in faded marker. Inside were photo albums, pages and pages of frozen smiles, birthday parties, beach trips, graduations. There I was, always slightly off center, always holding the camera or carrying the cake or picking up the slack. I closed the album and placed it on the top shelf, far back, behind the winter blankets I never used. Then I walked to my car. The pecan pie I'd brought on Christmas Eve was still there, sitting in the back seat. The crust had cracked. The filling had collapsed inward, still wrapped, still untouched. I picked it up, walked across the street, and set it on the front steps of a small church I'd never entered. No note, no explanation. Just something sweet left behind. Back home, my phone buzzed. One message, from Mom. "We lost the house. Ryan moved out. Your dad blames me. I was wrong, Emily. Please come home." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, I tapped delete. No reply. Not because I wanted to punish her. Just because I'd already come to the door, and they'd already decided I didn't belong. I went outside without a coat and let the cold sting my skin. It didn't hurt, not like it used to. This kind of cold didn't freeze. It cleared. The street was silent, the sky wide open, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because someone needed me, but because I didn't need to be needed. If you've ever been the one who gave everything and got erased in return, drop a comment below. And if this story hit home, subscribe, because you deserve to be seen.
Screamed out.
Shut down.
Shoved aside. That was my final family dinner. My name is Elena Hart. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because I need to ask you something. Has your own blood ever looked at you like a stray dog they couldn't wait to chase away? That's exactly what it felt like. We were sitting at the table, pretending like it was still a family, pretending like the tension wasn't thicker than the mashed potatoes no one touched. My sister, Brielle, slammed her glass down so hard, water spilled across the lace runner. You ruin everything. Every time you walk into a room, it's like the air turns sour. I hadn't said a word the entire evening, just passed the dishes.
Smiled faintly.
Tried to be smaller, quieter. But my silence was apparently the loudest offense. Mom didn't even blink. She just folded her napkin and said, "She's right. You're exhausting, Elena. You bring nothing but guilt and need. Always needing something. Just go." I blinked slowly, like maybe I misheard. But then Dad, who used to be my only anchor, reached for the remote and turned on the news. No one even looked at me, like I wasn't a daughter or a sister, just a burden whose exit would make dinner taste better. So I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out the front door of the house I had secretly been helping keep afloat, paying off bills, forwarding half my paycheck, keeping the lights on when their pride couldn't admit they needed me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even close the door loudly. I just disappeared. And in my silence, something inside me broke. But not in the way they expected. I spent that first night in a tiny Airbnb downtown. Mattress on the floor, ramen on the stove, peace in my chest. It felt like losing a limb but breathing for the first time. The next day, I woke up with one clear thought. They never cared what I gave. So maybe it was time to stop giving. 7 days later, to the hour, I got a text from Mom.
"Hey.
Electric's due today. Can you send $180? No apology. No check-in. Just an invoice. I stared at my screen for a full 5 minutes. Then I typed, "I thought you wanted me gone." And when she replied, just 3 dots typing for a while, I followed it with, "So, I made sure the lights would follow me out." I had already removed my name from the utility account the night I left. I didn't even need to explain further, because a minute later, I got a final message from her. "Elena, what did you do?" I didn't reply, But I knew she'd figured out the moment the fridge clicked off and the TV went dark. There's a strange kind of power in being erased. Because once you're no longer expected, you're free to stop sacrificing. They never asked where I was. Never wondered if I was okay. But when the power went out and the heating died and the internet stopped working, suddenly I wasn't invisible anymore. 3 days after I stopped paying, I heard through a cousin that my sister Brielle had posted on Facebook. Anyone know how to fight back utility companies who mess up your account? Our power got cut off out of nowhere. Not even a warning. I laughed. Because there had been so many warnings. They just never saw them because they never saw me. You see, while Brielle and Mom were sipping wine and slandering me behind closed doors, I was the one filling the gaps. When the mortgage fell behind, I called in the payment. When the water bill was overdue, I wired the cash quietly. When the car broke down, I gave Mom my own. No, thank you. No, we're proud. Just silence until I dared to stop giving. And suddenly they noticed the hole I left behind. Aunt Celia called me next. Sweetheart, your mom's worried sick. The house is cold, Brielle's furious, and your mom's too embarrassed to ask for help.
But you know she didn't mean what she said.
Families fight. I closed my eyes and whispered into the phone. She didn't fight me. She banished me. She was upset.
So was I.
But I didn't ask them to leave my life. Aunt Celia went quiet, then said, "They're saying you're being dramatic, that you're making them suffer on purpose." I almost laughed, because for once they were half right. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about balance. If I wasn't welcome in their lives, then neither was my effort. My money, my time, my loyalty. On day 10, I got a voicemail from Brielle. Her voice was tight, angry. You could have told us you were taking your name off stuff. This isn't funny, Elena. Grow up. Mom's health is acting up from the stress. If anything happens to her, that's on you. I stared at the phone. No apology. Just blame.
Still.
I almost replied. Almost. But then I remembered her yelling, "Get out of our lives," like it was a prayer. And I realized she never meant to say sorry.
She just wanted control back.
I started documenting everything. Screenshots of payments I'd made, receipts, text messages. I stored it all in a private Google Drive folder labeled "The Cost of Being Disposable." Not for them.
For me.
To remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my kindness had receipts. And now, so would their regret. By week 2, the lawn grew wild. The mail piled up. They posted a passive-aggressive GoFundMe titled, "Help a mother and daughter save their home." I didn't donate, but I watched. And I waited. Because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one paying the price. When you stop holding up a collapsing house, people finally hear the creaking. But it's never gratitude that follows. It's panic. The messages kept coming in bursts. First silence, then guilt, then threats, then desperation. One night I got a text from Mom. "Elena, please. The water's off now. We're boiling snow.
Just send what you can.
Don't do this to us." Don't do this to us? I read that line over and over again. Like I hadn't spent 3 years cleaning up behind them, scraping my own dreams to dust so they could live in comfort. Like I hadn't walked in from my 12-hour shifts, only to find her feet up on the couch, sipping wine, watching soap operas while my paycheck kept the walls from falling. And now I was the one doing this to them. A week later, a neighbor posted on the local Facebook group, "Does anyone know what's going on with the Hart family? Their front porch light has been off for days, and I saw someone delivering notice papers." I didn't comment, but I watched the replies. Heard the daughter left. The younger one's always been entitled.
Sad.
The mom used to be so kind. I almost laughed at that last one.
Kind?
She once told me I had a failure face at 17, said I should just get married instead of chasing college. And when I did get into university on scholarship, she rolled her eyes and said, "Don't come crawling back when you realize books don't pay rent." But it was my rent money that had been keeping her lights on. I checked the bank account I used to wire money from. The automatic payments were all shut off. Every last one. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. They'd made it clear I wasn't family anymore. So I stopped acting like I was. Meanwhile, I was learning to breathe. Really breathe. I picked up hours at a co-working space. Started teaching coding workshops for women trying to leave toxic jobs. For the first time in years, people were thanking me, saying I mattered, telling me I was brilliant, not burdensome. One night, my old boss, a woman named Ms. Clark who had once mentored me during an internship, messaged me out of the blue. I heard what happened at home. I just wanted to say, if you ever want to pitch that app idea you told me about, I have 3 investors interested in female founders. Let me know. I sat with that message for 10 whole minutes, then typed, I'd love to. That night, for the first time in forever, I slept without grinding my teeth. Back at their house. I knew what was coming. Mom and Brielle had spent years building their kingdom on my quiet shoulders. And now that I'd stepped out from underneath, their throne was rotting. They kicked me out like garbage. But I rose like fire, quiet, hot, and unstoppable. Not with vengeance. With vision. 3 weeks after I left, I walked into a small conference room inside a glass tower downtown. I was wearing the same blazer I'd bought from a thrift store 2 years ago. But now I wore it like armor. Ms. Clark introduced me to the 3 investors with a smile. This is Elena Hart. She's developing a platform for remote caregivers and home managers, the ones who hold families together but never get seen.
They nodded politely.
Until I spoke. And then they listened. I pitched the app I'd once scribbled in a notebook between overnight shifts and grocery trips. An app that helps women track, manage, and bill the invisible labor they do, cooking, cleaning, budgeting, the unspoken jobs that held households like mine together until I walked away. I called it Unseen. 6 weeks later, I had funding. 8 weeks later, I had a team. 10 weeks later, our beta version was live. Meanwhile, back in my old neighborhood, their lights came back on, temporarily, thanks to a loan from some second cousin in Alabama. But by then, the gossip had already spread. Brielle was never the smart one. I heard Elena's doing something big now. She's on LinkedIn every week getting awards. One day, I got tagged in a comment under a photo from a Women in Tech event. Is this the same Elena Hart who used to live on Willow Street?
I didn't reply.
But I knew who would see it. A week later, I got another message from Aunt Celia. Your mom's asking about you again. Says she might have been harsh. Wants to talk.
Talk.
She didn't want to talk. She wanted to negotiate. But I wasn't for sale. Because while they were inside that house growing cold, I was out here becoming someone they never expected. I was speaking on panels, doing podcasts, writing op-eds with titles like, When Family Doesn't Value You, Build Your Own Legacy. Each time, I imagined Mom reading those words in her dim kitchen, her pride choking on every sentence. One evening, I walked past a bookstore and saw a flyer. Women Who Led Anyway, panel event, March 3rd. My name was on it, in bold, with the words, Founder,
CEO,
Advocate.
I stared at it for a long time.
And then I walked in and bought every last copy of the magazine I was featured in, not for them.
For me.
For the girl they said would never be anything. Some houses collapse in storms. Others just rot from the inside, after the only one holding it up walks away. It started with an unpaid gas bill, then a notice for overdue taxes. Then the Homeowners Association filed a complaint, something about property disrepair, unkept lawn, and vermin sightings. I didn't know any of this firsthand. I just watched it unfold online. Their once glossy lives started peeling like cheap wallpaper. One post from Brielle said, Does anyone know how to fight an eviction when your name's not technically on the deed?
I stared at that sentence. Technically. Right.
Because everything had been in Mom's name and mine. Not Brielle's. Not the golden girl, who deserved better than bills. The legal documents had always shown my name as co-signer, not for credit. For stability. Because I had the job, the record, the reliability. They just had the audacity. That's when it hit me. They were unraveling because I'd stopped covering for them. Not because I'd sabotaged them, but because I'd stopped saving them. Then the foreclosure letter came. It was shared, again, in a local group chat. Someone posted, "The Hart family house is listed for auction. So sad how quickly things can fall apart. So sad." I made tea and watched the comments roll in. Meanwhile, my own world was blooming. I'd just hired 2 new engineers. We were featured on a top startup watch list. I got an email from a national talk show asking if I'd appear for a Women's History Month special. I read the invite while sitting on a sunny cafe patio. The kind of place my family used to say was for show-offs with no responsibilities.
But now I was the show.
And the receipts? They were all in my name. That night, Mom called. Her number popped up like a ghost from another life. I stared at it ringing until it stopped. Then she texted, "Elena, the house is going. We don't know what to do. Please call me."
I didn't call.
I just replied, "You told me to leave your life." I did. So did my help. No exclamation. No insult. Just finality. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail. From the bank. It was a notice confirming the removal of my name from the mortgage. I'd filed for it quietly.
Cleanly.
Now it was official. The house they kicked me out of? No longer my burden. No longer my business. She tried to silence me with shame. But when the world heard my truth, her silence became permanent. It was a Friday night when the producer called. "We've been following your startup's journey. We'd love to have you on the show. Something special for Women's History Month. Are you open to it?" I was quiet for a moment. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue. The birthdays missed because I was working. The promotions declined so I could send extra money home. The way Mom once said, "You were always more help than heart." And now the world wanted to hear my voice. I smiled. I'm in. The studio was bright and cold. I sat across from the host, a woman I'd admired for years, and she asked, "You've built something incredible from scratch. But the name of your company, Unseen, where did that come from?"
I didn't hesitate.
It came from years of doing everything and being treated like I was nothing. It came from holding families together while being told I wasn't really part of one. It came from being erased and choosing to reappear on my own terms. Silence. Then applause. Then a single spotlight. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. The episode aired 3 days later. It went viral overnight. I got messages from strangers, women saying, "That was my story. You said what I never could. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone." But one message stood out. From a neighborhood friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Your mom watched it. Didn't say a word for hours. Just stared at the screen. Then she got up, turned the lights off, and went to bed without dinner." I didn't know how to feel.
Not joy.
Not pity. Just freedom. Because the girl they kicked out, the one they mocked for being too soft, too emotional, too much, she now had influence. And they had bills. They'd traded a daughter for control. And ended up losing both. A week later, I did a panel at a tech summit. At the end, I was handed a plaque that read, "Voice of the Year." I held it in my hand and remembered Mom's voice in my head. "No one wants to hear about your little struggles, Elena. Grow up." So I looked into the camera and said, without shaking, to every woman who is told she talks too much,
Talk louder.
to every daughter who is told she's ungrateful, know your worth. And to every person who is erased to keep the peace, come back louder than the silence they left you in. Thunderous applause. Flashbulbs. A standing ovation. And somewhere, in a dark house with unpaid electric bills, my mother watched that clip on a dim phone screen, charging off a neighbor's outlet. Some homecomings aren't about closure. They're about proof that you made it, without the hands that dropped you. It was a cloudy Sunday morning when I returned to the neighborhood.
Not to see them,
but to see me. The version of me that used to walk home with groceries in both arms, while Brielle sat on the couch texting boys. And Mom muttered, "Why can't you just be more alike?" I parked at the edge of the block. The old house was smaller than I remembered. Chipped paint, sagging roof, the curtains drawn like secrets. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I walked to the mailbox and slipped in a letter. Nothing long. Just the truth. You asked me to leave.
So I did.
And with me went the light, the loyalty, the lifeline. You told me I was a burden, but I paid the bills. You told me I wasn't family, but I was the foundation. So this isn't a reconciliation. It's a reminder.
I didn't abandon you.
I honored your request. Elena. Then I turned around and left. That was the last time I ever stepped foot on that street. A week later, Aunt Celia sent me a message. Your mom got the letter. She cried for hours. Didn't say a word. Just sat at the kitchen table staring at it. She said Mom keeps the envelope tucked into her Bible now, as if praying might turn back time. But you can't pray away reality, especially when you chose it. Especially when the daughter you tossed aside becomes the woman every mother now points to and says, be like her. Meanwhile, I was speaking at high schools, launching mentorship programs, and investing in shelters for displaced women. One of them approached me after a talk and asked, what gave you the strength to leave? I didn't hesitate. The moment I realized staying wasn't loyalty, it was slow death. She nodded like I'd given her a sword. And maybe I had. Back at home, the house went up for sale. Again. This time at a loss. Mom moved into a tiny apartment near the freeway. Brielle floated between friends' couches and bad decisions. And me? I was featured in Forbes. The headline read, "The girl they discarded, now building empires for women like her." Sometimes I wonder if she reads my articles. If she clicks the links, watches the interviews, hears my voice, and realizes that silence she demanded, it didn't destroy me. It made space for everything she feared most. My success. My truth. My voice. Some people throw you out of their story, forgetting the world's watching yours unfold. And in mine, they're just a footnote to my rise. It was a gala, velvet gowns, camera flashes, crystal chandeliers. The kind of room my mother once said wasn't made for girls like us. Funny, because now I wasn't just in it, I was headlining. Entrepreneur of the Year, they called it. But to me, it was just the final chapter of a book they never let me write. Until I walked away. They played a tribute video, clips of interviews, news segments, charity initiatives. Then came a surprise. A photo, an old one, of me at 12, standing outside our broken front door holding a report card with straight A's. No one had celebrated that moment.
Until now.
I took the stage. I looked into the sea of faces. And I said, I used to think success meant approval from my family, from my past. But I learned something stronger. Success is building a life so full, you no longer wait for someone else to clap for it. The audience rose. Applause thundered. But I was thinking about a woman miles away, sitting in a dim apartment, surrounded by silence and unpaid bills, watching me on an old TV, borrowed from a neighbor.
Mom.
The camera panned to the plaque in my hands. Elena Hart. Resilience. Reinvention. Revolution. She once said I brought nothing but trouble. And yet, here I was, funding education for girls like me, opening shelters under my foundation's name, changing lives with the same hands she said were only good for holding burdens. I didn't call her. I didn't send the footage. But I know she saw it.
How?
Because that night a florist told me, we got a delivery request from a woman who couldn't afford the full arrangement. She just wanted a single white rose sent anonymously. I didn't need a card. I knew who it was. And I didn't send anything back. Some wounds don't need stitches. They just need space to stop bleeding where no one cared. Final narration. They screamed for me to leave. And when I did, the silence echoed louder than their words ever could. They erased me from their home, but I became a name their world would never forget. And the girl they discarded? She didn't come back for revenge. She came back untouchable. Inheritance doesn't always reveal wealth. Sometimes, it reveals the truth. My name is Camille Donovan, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because I need to ask you, has your own mother ever treated you like a footnote at your father's table? Like a placeholder until her favorite showed up?
It was a Thursday.
Rain tapped against the windows like it knew what was coming. The will had been read. Not in a grand lawyer's office with mahogany chairs and glass water jugs like in the movies. No, just in my mother's dining room. A room that still smelled like the roast I made for my father the last Thanksgiving before his heart attack. The lawyer had already left, and now only family remained, if you could even call it that. I sat at the edge of the table, quiet, still. Across from me, my younger sister Chloe was grinning like she'd just won a prize at a raffle. Her new fiancé squeezed her hand under the table. Mom sat at the head as always, wearing pearls she hadn't earned and sipping from the wine glass I bought her last Christmas, the one she never thanked me for. That's when she put her hand on the will. Not metaphorically. Literally. She leaned forward, her palm flat over the paper like it was her crown. "You won't get a penny, Camille," she said. Her voice was sugar-coated venom. "Dad's decision stands. The house, the savings, the stocks, all go to Chloe. That's what he wanted." I didn't speak. "Not yet," she went on, twisting the knife like she'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. "You always said you didn't care about money. So now's your chance to prove it." Chloe giggled, a soft, smug sound that filled the silence like static. Everyone stared at me, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the scene, waiting for me to beg, cry, shout. But I didn't do any of those things. I simply placed my fork down on the edge of my plate. Then my knife. Deliberate. Graceful. I looked directly at my mother and said, "Then you won't get anything from me." The air shifted. Her smile faltered. But I didn't flinch. I rose from my chair, the same chair I used to sit in as a child, legs swinging while Dad told me bedtime stories over dinner prep. No goodbyes. No theatrics. Just the sound of my heels clicking against the wood floor as I walked away. Behind me, I heard Chloe scoff, so dramatic. But even she sounded unsure. Because I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just left. And in that moment, that exact moment, I knew. They hadn't just disrespected me. They had freed me from the need to prove anything. From the chains of being the good daughter. From the lie that family always means love. What they didn't realize, the girl they just cut off, was the only one who ever held them together. And what happened next? Let's just say, they'll never forget it. Love, when laced with conditions, is just debt disguised as devotion. I didn't always think my mother hated me. As a child, I thought the silence was just her way. The way she never hugged me after my dance recitals. The way she ruffled Chloe's hair, but never mine. The way she'd say, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Like my very existence was some sort of inconvenience. I told myself she was just strict, busy, tired. But over the years, the excuses wore thin, and the patterns became impossible to ignore. Chloe was the princess. Everything she touched was praised, even if it was broken. Every mistake was brushed off. Every tantrum rewarded. She crashed Dad's car at 17. They bought her a new one. She failed 2 semesters of college. They called it academic burnout and flew her to Italy for emotional recovery. Meanwhile, I graduated magna cum laude, paid my own tuition, got a job at a tech firm, and wired money home every month to help with bills. No one clapped. No one asked how I was sleeping, or eating, or living. Mom just said, "Well, you're the responsible one. You don't need help." I used to carry that sentence like a badge of honor. I don't need help. Until I realized it wasn't praise. It was abandonment dressed up as admiration. When Dad passed, I stepped up. I organized the funeral, paid off part of the mortgage, made sure Mom had groceries while Chloe was busy finding herself in Bali. For months, I worked double shifts, managed Mom's insurance paperwork, and covered utility bills without asking for a cent back. Not because I expected anything, but because I believed somewhere deep down that love meant showing up. That eventually, she'd look at me and see what I was worth. I was wrong. The week after the will reading, memories flooded back. Not the sweet ones. The real ones. Like the Christmas Mom gave Chloe a brand new iPad and handed me a $10 Walmart candle, still in the clearance sticker wrapping. Or the time I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "Camille? Oh, she's not really like Chloe. She's serious. Kind of cold. but she's good with numbers. As if my achievements were character flaws. As if being reliable made me less lovable. But nothing hit me harder than a photo I found in an old family album. It was from a school play. Chloe stood center stage, in costume, glowing under the spotlight. Mom stood beside her, arms wrapped tight around her waist. And their eye was cropped out of the frame. My arm was still visible, just a sliver of a sleeve on the edge of the photo. They had cut me out, deliberately. I stared at that image for 10 minutes, and then I burned it, because I finally understood. I wasn't unloved. I was used. I wasn't a daughter in her eyes. I was a tool. And the moment I stopped being useful, she discarded me, like I was nothing more than background noise in someone else's spotlight. But what she failed to realize, backgrounds are where foundations are built. And I was about to build something so strong, so undeniable, that even she wouldn't be able to crop me out again. Some inherit the house. Others inherit the wisdom not to beg for the keys. I stayed gone. No texts. No calls. No awkward drop-ins pretending things were fine. And at first, I thought they didn't notice. But then, the cracks began to show. Chloe was in over her head before the ink dried on the will. She moved into the house with her fiancé, the same one who once told me I was too intense at a dinner party when I corrected his math in front of friends. They started renovations immediately, tore out Dad's favorite oak floors and installed cold, trendy concrete slabs for aesthetics. She listed Mom's car for sale to make space. She cut off the gardener, fired the cleaning lady, and ignored a leaky pipe in the kitchen because, in her words, how hard can plumbing be? Within 3 weeks, I heard she'd missed the property tax deadline. 2 of Dad's remaining rental clients, the only income source left, threatened to leave due to mismanagement. By week 4, a family friend sent me a photo of the house. The front lawn, once trimmed and edged with tulips I used to plant each spring, was overgrown. The windows looked dirty. The porch light was shattered. But what struck me the most wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt. Nothing. No guilt. No ache. Just a hollow space where obligation used to live. One morning, I got a call from Mrs. Hemsworth, my dad's old accountant and lifelong friend. Her voice trembled as she said, "Camille,
I'm sorry.
I thought I should let you know. They're struggling. Chloe's made a mess of things. Honestly, everyone thought you'd be the one to take over. You were the responsible one. You always have been." I didn't respond at first. She added quietly, "You should have been the one. Everyone knows it." That stuck with me. Echoed. Not out of pride, but because it proved something I'd always wondered.
They all saw it.
They just stayed silent. That Saturday, I drove to the cemetery alone. Dad's grave sat on the east side, under the willow tree where the sun reached late. I hadn't visited since the funeral. Not because I didn't miss him, but because it hurt to feel like he left me behind with them. I stood there for a long time, wind nudging the hem of my coat, watching the light shift across his name. And I whispered, "I'm not fighting them. I'm not rescuing them.
Not this time.
You taught me how to stand, so now I'm standing but not for them." I let the silence settle, then added, "I hope wherever you are you finally see me." On the drive back, I passed by the old neighborhood.
Kids were riding bikes.
A woman was walking a dog with a stroller in the other hand. And for the first time, I saw my childhood not as a memory but as a survival story. I had grown up in the shadows of someone else's spotlight. Now, the light was gone, and I wasn't chasing it anymore. I was building my own. Sometimes, the most powerful sound isn't a scream, it's the silence that follows your absence. When you grow up being told to keep the family together, you become good at things that go unnoticed. You learn how to stretch a dollar, how to read tension in a room, how to write emails for your father's clients because he never liked all the computer stuff, how to keep the books balanced while your sister overspent the budget, again. But when I walked away from them, I took all that knowledge with me. And for the first time, I used it for myself. I rented a small studio with peeling paint and terrible lighting. It had no air conditioning, but it had sunlight and silence. That was all I needed. I called up 2 old colleagues, Women I had worked with during my corporate years. Women who, like me, were passed over, used, or ignored. They knew the grind. They had nothing to prove and everything to build. We started small. Branding services, data analytics for small firms, content planning. Within 2 months, we had 5 clients. By month 6, 14. I worked from morning till midnight. Not out of desperation. Out of freedom. This time, I didn't feel drained. I felt lit from the inside. One of our earliest clients was a logistics firm my family had once mocked. "They're too small time," Mom had said years ago when I suggested partnering with them for Dad's company. Now, that same firm had quadrupled in size and became our biggest account. I didn't mention the family connection. I didn't need to. We did the work. We delivered. We scaled them. They recommended us to 3 other firms. And just like that, the dominoes began to fall. 3 months later, I received an email from Business Growth Weekly. Subject: "We'd like to feature your startup in our Women Who Lead Spotlight." I stared at the screen for a full minute before responding. Not out of surprise, but because I knew this was only the beginning. I started getting tagged on LinkedIn. Camille Donovan helped triple our revenue in 2 quarters. Leadership that listens, adapts, and delivers. Proud to work with this team. I didn't brag. I didn't boast. I just let my work speak for me, in a language my family never bothered to learn. Meanwhile, back home, things weren't going so well. The house Chloe inherited was up for sale, quietly at first, then publicly. A cousin messaged me, "Hey, is everything okay with Aunt Marla and Chloe?" I saw their listing. Looks desperate. I didn't reply, but I clicked the listing. Saw the photos. The fancy chandelier had been replaced by a cheaper fixture. Dad's antique bookshelf was gone. The walls looked cold, not just empty, but stripped of identity. There were price cuts every week. Still, no offers. I heard whispers from old neighbors. "Chloe's not as sharp as people thought. Your mom's been asking around about reverse mortgages." But I said nothing. No warnings. No rescue. No, I told you so. Because I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was my own foundation. And here's the thing about building quietly. By the time they notice you've disappeared, you're already too far ahead for them to catch up. They gave me nothing, and still lost everything. The house on Wrenhill Lane used to be a symbol. People would pass it and whisper, "That's the Donovan place." Not because it was flashy, but because it stood for something. My father's pride. His legacy. Stability. Now it was starting to rot from the inside out. The roof had gone untouched through the winter. The tiles were curling like dead leaves. A pipe burst in the basement, flooding the foundation. Power got shut off for 2 days straight in June because Chloe forgot to pay the bill again. I didn't hear any of this directly. But whispers have wings in a small community. The family name started slipping from reverence to ridicule. Chloe had no idea how to manage estate taxes or navigate Dad's residual business contracts. She tried selling off furniture, even some of Mom's jewelry, but couldn't explain the missing paperwork when a buyer asked for verification. She posted a desperate Facebook message looking for a consultant to help her restructure Dad's old company. Nobody responded publicly, but someone screenshotted it and sent it to me, captioned, "Remember when she said you were too serious for business? Look who's serious now." I didn't reply. I didn't laugh. I just saved it. Mom started calling extended relatives. People she hadn't spoken to in years. People she once looked down on, like Aunt Rochelle, who worked 2 jobs after her divorce and was never polished enough for family parties. Now, she was dialing Rochelle like a lifeline. Nobody picked up. Nobody returned her messages. Then one morning my phone buzzed. It was her. My mother. I stared at the screen. I didn't pick up. She called again. And again. On the 5th try, I answered. Not with my voice, but with a text. "You said I wouldn't get a penny. And you were right. I never needed one." Then I blocked the number. There was no satisfaction in doing it. Just clarity. A clean line drawn through years of disrespect. Word spread that the house was going into default. Neighbors whispered at the grocery store. One posted a vague tweet. Wild to watch a legacy fall apart in slow motion. Wren Hill isn't what it used to be. Another tagged me in a photo of the front gate with the note torn off the mailbox. I untagged myself because I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to circle back and say, look what happened. They were already living in the ruins of what they chose. Mom tried one last thing, the ultimate guilt move.
She emailed me.
Subject: please talk to me. No message body. Just an attachment, a photo of Dad's grave.
As if that would break me.
But it didn't, because I had already spoken to him. I'd made peace. And she didn't get to use his memory as a weapon. Their world was crumbling. Not because of me, but because I was no longer holding it up. And when people build kingdoms on the backs of those they call lesser, they're always shocked when the ground disappears. Erased daughters don't disappear. They just learn to rise louder than memory. It started with a LinkedIn repost. Someone from one of our client firms, a VP, shared my story in a corporate leadership group, saying, Camille Donovan's journey is what real resilience looks like. Quiet power, built from scratch. That one post was shared over 2,000 times. Then came the invite. A prestigious women's leadership summit in Chicago. Would you be our closing keynote? They'd cover my flight, hotel, even give me a stipend. But more than that, they wanted my voice. Not for a client. Not behind the scenes. Front stage. Centered.
Heard.
I almost said no. Old wounds have a way of whispering doubts. But something in me, the version of myself that never needed their validation, said yes. I wore a deep burgundy suit. No brand labels. Just sharp tailoring and quiet confidence. The room was packed. Women from finance, media, health, and tech, CEOs, creatives, mothers, founders. And as I walked to the podium, I didn't shake. Because I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there to be. My speech wasn't full of buzzwords or bullet points.
It was a story.
I told them about growing up as the shadow behind someone else's crown. About bookkeeping without a title. About being the safety net everyone needed. Until they didn't. I didn't name names.
Didn't speak with venom.
But I said this. Sometimes being erased is a gift. You get to rewrite your life in your own ink. You get to stop performing and start becoming. And when you rise, not to get back at them, but to finally see yourself, you realize they didn't break you. They freed you. I looked out into the crowd. Eyes were wet. Hands gripped notebooks. And then they rose. A standing ovation. Thunderous.
Sustained.
Soul deep. Back home, I didn't know this, but someone had recorded the speech and posted a clip online. A neighbor tagged my mother in the comments. She watched it late at night, alone in the dim living room with the curtains drawn. She didn't know I'd find out. But a former friend of hers, one who now followed me, messaged me. Your mom saw the video. She didn't say a word, just stared at the screen like someone had swallowed her breath. I imagined it. Her on that old floral couch. No audience. No applause. Just regret echoing in the silence she built herself. And here's the thing. She never once believed I'd amount to anything without their table. But I'd built my own. And now, the same people she desperately wanted approval from were applauding her daughter.
The daughter she erased.
She used to tell me I was too emotional to lead. Now I was being invited to speak on emotional intelligence in leadership panels across the country. She once said, "You'll always be behind Chloe." Now Chloe couldn't pay off a leaking roof. She had bet everything on the wrong legacy. That night, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a photo, me and my dad from when I was 10, sitting on the front porch, books on my lap. Taped to it was a note. You always were the one who paid attention. It was her handwriting. No apology. No explanation. Just that. And honestly, that was enough. Because now she knew what I'd always known. Power doesn't live in inheritance. It lives in who you become after they stop believing in you. Some visits aren't for reconciliation. They're for release. It had been over 2 years since I last saw the house. The walls that once held my childhood, my sleepless teenage nights, my quiet sacrifices, had become nothing more than faded siding and overgrown hedges. I didn't knock. I didn't park in the driveway. I just stood across the street, breathing in a moment I had waited for without realizing it. Not revenge. Closure. The house looked tired. The white trim was yellowing. The windows streaked. The roses Dad once trimmed like clockwork were now long, wild arms of red and thorn. There was a foreclosure notice tucked halfway under the welcome mat. A welcome mat. Still there, after everything. I walked up quietly and slid an envelope into the old brass mailbox. The letter inside wasn't bitter. It was honest. You gave me nothing. I gave you everything. Now I give you space and silence. Not because I'm angry, but because I finally understand. I was never meant to belong where I wasn't seen. You made your choice. And now I've made mine. This is the last thing I'll ever leave at this house. No signature. Just the clean end of a story. I turned and walked away, my heels soft against the cracked concrete path, my breath steady. Behind me, a curtain shifted. She'd seen me, but she didn't come out.
Not this time.
Later that week, I heard from a former neighbor who still watched the street like a retired detective. She found the letter, he told me. She stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. Then she sat on the porch steps. Just Saturday. He paused. She looked small, Camille, like she'd finally realized how much she'd lost. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Because sometimes the greatest power is walking away, not in rage, but in peace. Letting someone sit in the silence they created. That weekend, Mom called my old cell, the number I no longer used. She left a voicemail I would never hear. I imagine it wasn't an apology. She never did those. But I also imagined she was holding the letter in one hand and an overdue water bill in the other. While Chloe scrolled her phone on the couch, still waiting for the world to hand her something she never earned. That was their circle. And I was finally outside of it. Meanwhile, my circle was growing. I just signed a lease on a second office location. My assistant was onboarding 2 new interns. Our firm had been featured in 3 more business publications that month. I was building a legacy, not out of spite, but out of the space they once called empty. And that childhood home? It was no longer home. It was a shell. A place I outgrew the second I realized I was never the problem. Sometimes the letter you leave behind isn't for them to understand. It's for you. To know you finally said everything without needing a single reply. Some legacies aren't inherited. They're rebuilt from rubble and risen from silence. The gala hall shimmered with soft gold lighting and navy blue tablecloths. Crystal glasses clinked softly. The theme was voices that change futures. I didn't expect much when I got the invitation. I thought maybe I'd be sitting at a table near the back, a token nod to my company's recent work. But as I walked in, the event director found me instantly. She smiled. "You're our final honoree tonight." I froze. "Philanthropist of the Year," she said. "Your foundation, your journey, it's inspired so many." I stood backstage, just off the velvet curtain, as the MC read my name. Tonight, we honor a woman who didn't just rebuild after betrayal. She turned silence into strategy, pain into progress, and memory into momentum. People began to clap. Then the applause built, thunderous, echoing, a rhythm of recognition I never once begged for, but had earned. I stepped into the light. Not the light they thought I'd crawl toward, but the light I had built myself, brick by brick, speech by speech, decision by decision. I took the mic and scanned the room. CEOs, lawyers, activists, artists, teenage girls who looked up at me the way I once looked up at everyone else, wondering if I'd ever be enough. I didn't cry, but my voice did soften. I stand here not because I won, but because I refused to stay invisible. And tonight, I'm proud to announce the Donovan Future Fund, named after my father, will support girls who've been told they are too much, too little, or simply not enough. We'll give them tools, mentorship, safety, and most of all, Permission to take up space without apology. Flashbulbs erupted. Somewhere in the front, a young girl with tight curls clapped so hard her glasses slipped down her nose. At that same moment, in a house 2 towns away, my mother sat in the dark. Power shut off again. No central heating. Just a candle flickering in the corner, next to bills piled on the coffee table like unpaid sins. She had no one left to blame. No one left to beg. Only Chloe, dozing on the couch, jobless and bitter. And the TV. The gala was airing on the local network. I filled the screen in high definition.
Poised.
Glowing. A crown of earned grace across my shoulders. And as my voice rang out through the speakers, I imagined she leaned forward and saw everything she threw away. She said I wouldn't get a penny. I say in my final voiceover, as the gala fades to black. She was right. I got peace. I got power. I got a future. And now, she gets to remember me like this. Forever out of reach.